Welcome to Family Law Talk. Family Law Talk. Presented by Kirk Stange of Stange Law Firm, PC. Stange Law Firm is a multi-state family law firm. Now, here's your host, Kirk Stange.
Welcome to Family Law Talk. We have an interesting topic today. The topic is the real estate assessor's valuation. And this episode today is based on an article on our blog, familylawheadquarters.com, dated June 8th, 2025. And the title of the article is the real estate assessor's value accurate? So as a follow-up to the episode today, going over to familylawheadquarters.com and read this article on this topic for more information. But let's go ahead and jump on in. In a lot of dissolutions of marriage, the value of the marital home is often a significant issue. For some individuals who are going through a divorce, the marital home may be the most valuable asset out there. And so to resolve a divorce, the parties are going to have to either agree on a value of the marital home, or the court's going to have to decide what the marital home is worth. And that's really the only way marital property and debt can be divided, which is dividing marital property and debt in a just manner. But to do that, you've got to know the value of all the assets, and that includes the marital home. Obviously, in some cases, it can be more complicated when parties own more real property than just the marital home. Like maybe they have a vacation home, or maybe they have rental property or commercial property. And certainly in those circumstances, all of those properties would need to be evaluated as well, okay? But one of the big questions lots of individuals have when going through divorce and trying to figure out how to divide property and debt is whether or not the real estate assessor's valuation is accurate or not. In other words, will the court rely on that valuation, or can we rely on that valuation for settlement purposes? Can we introduce that valuation into court? And sometimes parties look at the real estate assessor's valuation in all candor and they think it's way off base. In a lot of cases, parties might think the real estate assessor's valuation is way high. So they're making the property worth way more than it ought to be worth. In some circumstances, one or both parties could think the opposite. They might think the assessor's valuation is really low. So maybe the assessor thinks the value of the property is a certain amount, but the party disputes it. They don't think it's accurate or not, okay? And so this is very common in divorce cases, parties looking at the assessor's value and either thinking it's way too high or it's way too low, and they want to know what to do, and they want to know whether the assessor's valuation is accurate or is it not accurate. And so that's the topic here today. Obviously, every case is different. The circumstances regarding the real estate assessor evaluating certain properties is going to be a little bit different. But candidly, there are some things, at least I've seen through the years and representing clients in lots of cases, and certainly in dealing with assessors' valuations. And one of the big issues is that a lot of assessors do what's called a drive-by assessment. Okay, so they might drive by the property, they might observe it from the outside, but oftentimes they don't even go inside the marital home. If the homeowner's not home, they might not even speak to the homeowner, right? So the assessor might not know all kinds of things, like what upgrades have been made to this house, what improvements have been made to it. And then on the flip end, if there's repairs that are needed, if there's things in the house that's outdated and maybe need to be updated, like new carpets, new flooring, maybe new AC units, right? Maybe new air handlers or new water heaters or these kinds of things. A lot of parties would be upset and say, look, the real estate assessor didn't even take this stuff into account. And so their valuation doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and it ought to not be relied upon, okay? On the flip end, if one party thinks the assessor's valuation is off base and that it's too low, their argument might be, look, they didn't go inside the house. They didn't see all the improvements that were made inside of it. Maybe there's new water heaters. Maybe there's new AC units. Maybe new flooring or carpeting was put in. And all these things increase the value, but the assessor didn't even know this stuff as well. So look, inherent in real estate assessors' valuations in terms of the critique is the fact that oftentimes they're not even going inside the home. And so they don't even know for sure what's been done, what hasn't been done, the areas of the home that need to be improved upon, maybe are even out of code. Maybe the home was built long ago, and certain setups within the home might be outside of best practices in this day and age, and maybe wouldn't even clear code if somebody went in and inspected it, and maybe that could impact the value. Okay, so this is one of the biggest critiques when you get into real estate assessors' valuations. So in a lot of cases, what parties want to do, instead of using the real estate assessor's valuation, is hire a real estate appraiser. Okay, so there's lots of outside real estate appraisers. They can come, they can see the marital home. Typically, they're going to come inside, they're going to walk around the outside of the property, inspect that too. Typically, they can ask the homeowner about, the pros and the cons of the property. They can ask about the upgrades that have been made, and maybe ask about the items where upgrades haven't been made, but they need to be made. And they can then take a better, take better data and information in order to have a more accurate valuation of the property itself. Okay. Another advantage of having a real estate appraiser come in is that they can actually come into court and they can testify in court. And so in a divorce matter, it's important to not only hire a real estate appraiser if this is an issue in the case, but to hire a real estate appraiser who has experience testifying in court, because frankly, a lot of real estate appraisers have never done this before. So that would be difficult for them. And maybe some would not even be willing to do that in terms of coming into court. So finding a qualified real estate appraiser who's properly licensed, who's willing to come into court and testify, that's typically the best path where parties disagree on the value of the marital home or other property. Just hire a real estate appraiser. Candidly, in some cases, both parties will have separate appraisals done, right? Husband might have one done, wife might have one done. Those appraisals could turn out to be pretty similar, or they could turn out to be pretty different, in which case, parties have to decide whether to meet in the middle or to present the case to the court, and then the court has to decide what appraisal they think is more credible or not, okay? One of the other questions is this, which is sort of interesting, and this is a little bit in the weeds, I should say, out of the gates, but it's this, which is, will a real estate assessor's valuation, can it even come into court? So could a lawyer even admit it and present it to the judge? And this is really kind of an interesting question. And again, this is in the weeds, but arguably, if the real estate assessor isn't in court, an attorney could argue that it's hearsay, so it's an out-of-court statement offered for the truth of the matter asserted. That could argue lack of foundation, and that nobody came in and testified in terms of the foundation for the valuation. In other words, what facts and data were relied upon. So, a savvy lawyer who doesn't want the assessor's valuation coming in for one reason or the other, they think it's too high or they think it's too low. If they don't want it in, they're going to object and say that it shouldn't come in. And from my experience, in a lot of instances, it's not going to come in. And then again, not to get too much into the weeds, an attorney, if they want to admit it and the other side's objecting for hearsay, lack of foundation, maybe some other reasons, then an attorney who wants to admit it might argue, wait a minute, there's an exception for printouts from government web pages. This is a printout from a government web page. I think I can admit it on those grounds. Maybe that works. Maybe that doesn't work, because it has opinion-based testimony contained within it. It's not just data. And so this is real murky too. So the reality is, unless the other side's going to consent to the admission of the real estate assessor's valuation, I don't think a party or an attorney can necessarily rely on the fact that this is going to be admissible in court if the other side's likely to object, okay? Another interesting situation that I've seen in a lot of cases is people looking at online web page valuations. So I know one of the big web pages is Zillow. Most parties can go to Zillow, type in their address. It'll have an approximate value for property, and it'll have some property history in terms of what it's sold for and when it last sold and these kinds of things. And again, the question here is that accurate or not? Again, the problem is Zillow didn't go on the home. Zillow didn't inspect the home. Zillow's doing approximations based on sales that have been made in the area, presumably the size of the home, the features, and these kinds of things. But again, Zillow, whether it's accurate or not, I think a lot of people would say not so accurate. And then you get into an issue of, can you admit a Zillow valuation in court or some similar webpage? And the answer is probably not, unless the other side is going to consent. Again, you're going to get hearsay, lack of foundation objections, and this is not a government webpage, so you can't argue that exception to get it admitted. So, if a party is saying, I don't want to do a real estate appraisal, I just want to get Zillow admitted into court, that might be easier said than done because of these evidentiary hurdles I've already mentioned. So listen, for most cases, okay, where parties disagree on the value of the marital home, and this is a big issue in the case, okay, and it's not going to be reconcilable. Parties aren't going to be able to meet in the middle or something like this. In most instances, what's advisable is to get a real estate appraiser who's licensed and who has experience testifying in court to come and evaluate the home. That's almost always the best practice. That's the best path. Some parties might be resistant because they don't want to pay for a real estate appraisal. But if this is a big issue of the case, this is almost always the path that a party has to undertake. Real estate assessors and Zillow valuations, maybe not that reliable and hard to get admitted into court. Okay, so that's the episode today. Definitely an interesting topic and one I wanted to cover as a follow-up to the episode today. Going over to our blog, familylawheadquarters.com. Read the article dated June 8th, 2025, titled, Is the Real Estate Assessor's Value Accurate? This will give you more information on this topic. But thanks for tuning in today. Stay tuned to our next episode of Family Law Talk coming up. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to Family Law Talk with Kirk Stange. Visit StangeLawFirm.com for more about today's topic or to put Stange Law Firm to work for your family today. The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely on advertisements. Neither the Supreme Court of Missouri or Illinois reviews or approves certifying organizations or specialist designations. The information you obtained in this podcast is not, nor is it intended to be, legal advice. You should consult an attorney for advice regarding your individual situation. We invite you to contact us and welcome your calls, letters, and electronic mail. Contacting us does not create an attorney-client relationship. Please do not send any confidential information to us until such time as an attorney-client relationship has been established. Past results afford no guarantee of future results, and every case is different and must be judged on its own merits. Kirk Stange is responsible for the content. Headquarters, Office 120 South Central Avenue, Suite 450, Clayton, Missouri 63105. Kirk Stange is licensed in Missouri, Illinois, and Kansas.